Today we're going to talk about a surprisingly controversial topic, which is frame rate. Does 30 frames a second versus 60 frames a second really affect the gameplay that much? Whether it is a racing game or space exploration or swinging around in New York as Spider-Man, does a higher frame rate actually matter? Because what's kind of bizarre is a lot of big Xbox voices are saying that we should give up on the idea of 60 frames a second on consoles. And to be honest, I am deeply confused by this. But let's discuss. What's up, gamers? DreamcastGuy here. Hi, hope you're having a great day. If you could like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. Before we actually jump into this topic today, let me quickly thank the sponsor for this video, Factor. As summer begins to heat up, a lot of us are starting to think about how to get healthy. That way we can look good on the beach. And part of that comes down to eating right, which is why I'm very happy to be partnering with Factor. These are fresh, never frozen meals that are easy to cook in under 2 minutes. You just pop them in the microwave and they're instantly good to go. But more importantly than that, they are absolutely delicious. They've got stuff like taco bowls. They've got smoothies. They've got stuff to fit your particular wellness goals, like Protein Plus that has 30 grams of protein per serving, and even stuff that's very low calorie. I think it's actually great that this has such an easy way to get meals directly to you without ordering takeout all the time. I really can't recommend this enough, but if you want to try it for yourself, go to factor75.com and use coupon code DreamcastGuy for 50% off your first box. Now, it's this code right here on the screen. I also have it as the top comment and in the description box. So if you want to try eating something that's delicious and definitely worth the cash, check it out. That's DreamcastGuy. Now let's get back to the video. Now, I want to make it very clear, this is not trying to insult the Xbox or, praise the PlayStation 5 or PC architecture. I'm not trying to bag on the Nintendo Switch because, let's face it, pretty much all Nintendo Switch games, whether they are third-party ports or even stuff like The Legend of Zelda, run at 30 frames a second. Instead, I'm just so interested in this conversation because to me, it feels like something we already got past years ago. So the major inspiration is this tweet that a lot of people are honestly straight up mocking. This is Destin Legary. He's the major Xbox guy over at IGN, and I think a lot of times he is a very reasonable guy. I heavily disagree with a lot of his opinions. I think his train of thought is correct. He just lands in a different position than I am. But he said this: 3 months ago, I had people in my mentions telling me that the 24 frames per second Starfield off-screen gameplay looked like 60 FPS. Today, the game being locked at 30 FPS is a huge deal. I'm telling you, it will not matter as much as you think. The reason that was 24 frames a second gameplay the last time they showed it during this documentary was because it was off screen and they were mostly just filming Todd Howard. The gameplay was just in the background. 60 frames a second is a buzzword that people love to tout as a victory for their console games and for games that make sense. Bethesda is getting in front of it and explaining why they chose to put their creation at 30 frames a second, and it's the exact right move. Now, obviously, everybody is laser focusing on the 60 frames a second is a buzzword. As a person who's definitely been getting more into, PC gaming, playing stuff online, doing first-person shooters, or even action games and stuff, I would say frame rate is very crucial. I actually see weird tweets from people claiming that the human eye can only detect 30 frames a second, that 60 frames a second is unnoticeable, which to me is just baffling. I mean, anytime you watch any sort of like side-by-side comparison, sort of just displaying 30 frames a second versus 60 frames a second. Now, obviously, I am currently using special software to record my screen. So even now, even through that secondary lens of recording this recording, I think it is much more visibly smooth when you see games that are running at 30 frames a second like this versus 60 frames a second. Now he's going to show the 60 FPS here in a second. Whether it is foliage effects or just the way you're able to act and react a lot quicker, I think that it is incredibly vital. Look at that 60 frames a second. 60 frames a second does affect gameplay. And I think we've all made our mind up on this a long time ago. I mean, Xbox 360 games, PlayStation 3 games, and then of course the Xbox One versus the PlayStation 4, those games really prioritized smooth visuals via frame rate. So a lot of people are actually making fun of this tweet because it's strange that this is Dan Stapleton. This guy is head of reviews at IGN, and even he is saying it's not a buzzword, but it's definitely subjective how strongly you feel about it. Some people definitely care more about frame rate than others, but it's really weird. People are actually posting this old PewDiePie. It's evolving just backwards. If 60 frames a second was already achieved on console, why would you go back to 30 frames a second? Of course, people are also showing this old message from Aaron Greenberg, one of the heads of Xbox, where in May 2020, before the Xbox Series X came out, he claimed 60 frames a second will be the standard output, but the architecture allows us to support up to 120 frames a second. This guy is legitimately a guy who is on the ground level making executive decisions about the Xbox Series X, and he's saying games would go up to 120 frames a second, and now we're happy if they're a stable 30. Now, again, I'm not insulting the Xbox here. Instead, I'm just saying that I'm sad that people seem to be so content with 30 FPS. I think games like Gran Turismo 7 look beautiful at 60 frames a second. God of War Ragnarok at 60 frames a second is absolutely glorious. Spider-Man at 60 frames a second is absolutely beautiful. Even The Last of Us at 60 frames a second. Every PlayStation first-party game runs at a consistent, solid, rock-hard 60 frames a second, and I think it improves their experience. Whereas with Xbox games, it really is hit and miss. Redfall, low frame rates. Starfield, low frame rates. Forza, high frame rates. Hi-Fi Rush, high frame rates. Now, when it comes to Starfield specifically, I realize why it's not running at 60 FPS, at least not on consoles. A lot of very nice game developers have really sort of reached out to say, because I did have some very viral statements. People are actually writing articles about me and stuff because I said that I considered this game to be unfinished because it can't hit a good solid 60 FPS. To me, a game is done when it runs at 60 FPS, but people have sort of explained to me that it's just not really possible, that the architecture of the Xbox Series X and even the PlayStation 5 are just not powerful enough to have 1,000 playable planets with movable objects like ham sandwiches and spaceships and stuff and have it run at anything except 30 frames a second. The grander point I'm trying to make here is that it is sort of just disappointing that we're beginning to realize that these companies did just straight up deceive us. A lot of these talking points like the power of the PlayStation 5 and Xbox, the most powerful console, it's not true. It's just absolutely not true. These systems are weaker than we would like. I think PlayStation 5's dev teams are better at working with PlayStation 5 architecture, but people are talking about this. Like Gene Park, obviously very, very great writer, says, these are outdated marketing points from 3 years ago. Your iPhone from 3 years ago is already considered old. You think your Xbox and PlayStation 5 are still up to date. A $70 AAA game on the world's most powerful console, saying they've always done bad graphics and bad frame rate isn't an excuse. I think I'm just in a spot where it is weird to me that as much as they're able to achieve in Starfield, I guess I'm still sad about those points, those little dots on the map that we are going to have to abandon. it's weird that the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X are big. They're beefy. These are systems that cost $500. But I guess if you compare it to the power of like my gaming PC here that I'm recording this video on is $2,000. Obviously 4 times the cost, you're going to get a better visual fidelity and frame rates. I guess I'm still just shocked because previous console generations were able to achieve a proper steady frame rates. And weirdly enough, in this age of obsession with good graphics, of no load times, of big ray tracing effects to have reflective puddles, it's weird that we're in a way having to regress technologically in certain aspects. Now, the last tweet I want to show here is from MVG. This guy obviously has worked on Xbox games. He's worked on a bunch of different games. He's a very, very, very good coder, great YouTuber, good friend of mine. Now, this dude straight up just jokes. He's being silly here. But now that we know the fact that the Xbox Series X is only going to run stuff at 30 frames a second, Starfield can only hit 30 frames a second, and hopefully we'll stick to that. I think personally it's going to be dipping to 20 frames a second. He said, we need that Xbox Series X Pro. He's obviously being silly. He's being satirical, but there is definitely a power problem. And I don't know. I wish I knew what the solution was, because this to me does seem like a problem. This does seem like an issue that needs to be resolved. I'm not sure if more dev time could do it. I'm not sure if they need to figure out how to do post-launch patches. I'm not sure if we need pro consoles. There is rumors of a PlayStation 5 Pro in development, but I guess I'm just in a space where I like games to look good and be smooth. I am totally willing to give up the idea of 4K for a better frame rate. I don't care if the game is, super blisteringly fast when it comes to its actual expressions. I think a good, smooth frame rate increases your immersion more than having crazy high visual fidelity, more than having that 4K on my big, crisp HDR screen. But these have just been some off-the-cuff thoughts, because honestly, this is just a weird circumstance. Tell me your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a big old thumbs up. Please share with your friends and subscribe if you haven't already. And please keep dreaming. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.